Welcome to Pain in the Grass, the official Lawn Pride podcast, where we dig deep into the real problems hiding in your yard. From weeds to grubs to mystery brown spots, we've got the dirt. Let's grow better together.
Picture this for a second. You step out into your yard this spring.
Right.
The air still has that, that really crisp chill to it, especially if you're here in North Carolina where the weather is just like cool and moist right now.
Oh, yeah, that classic early spring feel.
Exactly. And you look down and you see this patch of just really healthy, bright green clover popping up.
Just looking completely vibrant.
Right. And you might look at that soft three-leaf little plant and think, wow, my yard is thriving.
Because it's green.
Because it's green, it's lush, it blends right in with everything else. But according to the turf experts we are looking at today, that clover is actually not a sign of life at all.
No, not even close.
It is actually this glaring biological distress signal.
Yeah, and realizing that requires a pretty massive shift in how we observe our immediate environment.
It really does.
The brief we are analyzing today comes from a turf management company called Lawn Pride. And their approach here is fascinating. They take the standard homeowner view of a lawn and they completely flip it on its head.
Yeah, they really do.
They don't look at your yard as just this, passive patch of nature outside your window. They analyze it as an active organization.
Like a business.
Exactly, like a workplace with a very delicate operational balance.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because they use this, I think it's a super clever framing device, where they treat Clover like a rogue employee in that workplace.
Right, like an HR nightmare.
Yes. They've essentially written this employee spotlight for a weed.
Which is such a great way to put it.
It is. And the mission of our deep dive today is to really decode this brief. We want to figure out the actual mechanisms of how Clover operates, why it's so incredibly successful, and most importantly, what its sudden appearance is actually telling you about the health of the ground beneath your feet.
Right, because it's always communicating something. And the biological profile they provide in the text defines Clover very specifically to set up this whole workplace dynamic.
How so?
Well, it is categorized as a low-growing, fast-spreading winter annual. Though, they do note it can sometimes act as a perennial depending on conditions.
Okay.
But more importantly, its entire growth cycle is optimized to thrive in early spring conditions, often way before the surrounding environment has even fully woken up from winter.
It's getting to the office before anyone else.
Exactly. It beats everyone to the punch.
So sticking with their workplace metaphor here, Clover is basically that one coworker who seems, super friendly at first.
Oh, we all know the type.
Right. The dynamic. They smile. They seem totally harmless. They just kind of blend into the background of the office.
Just a nice green addition to the team.
Exactly. But then slowly they start leaving their coffee mugs on your desk.
Just one or two at first.
Yeah, and then they pull an extra chair into your cubicle, and before you know it, they are entirely claiming your space, and you are just squeezed into the corner trying to work.
Pushed totally to the margins.
Well, right, and the text specifically highlights Clover's knack for spreading quickly. But here's what I am really trying to wrap my head around.
Lay on me.
If it looks like grass, if it's green and it functionally covers the dirt so you don't have a mud pit, why is it such a massive threat to the rest of the office?
That's the big question.
Why is a lawn that is half grass and half clover considered a failing system by these experts?
Well, the problem really lies in its aggressive physical mechanics and this fundamental concept in turf management called uniformity.
Uniformity, okay.
Yeah. The brief points out that clover actively crowds out healthy turf grass. And it achieves this because it operates on a completely different biological blueprint than grass does.
How so? Grass just grows up, right?
Exactly. Grass generally grows vertically. It aims straight up to catch the sun.
Mm.
But clover, being this low-growing, fast-spreading opportunist, grays laterally.
Ah!
It literally creeps horizontally across the surface of the soil.
So it's operating on a completely different physical plane than the rest of the lawn?
Yes, precisely. And a healthy lawn, by its very definition in this field, relies on structural uniformity, everything growing together in the same way.
Right.
When clover moves in, it creates this secondary lower canopy. And because its broad leaves spread out horizontally, it physically shades the soil beneath it.
Oh, wow. So it's blocking the light.
Completely. It intercepts the sunlight before it can reach the lower sections of the grass blades or, any new grass seeds that are trying to germinate down in the dirt.
So it's actively suffocating the competition?
It really is. It creates this patchy, totally inconsistent texture that fundamentally disrupts the visual and structural continuity of the yard. You basically end up with these aggressive, dense mats of clover actively suppressing the vertical growth of the grass around it.
Man, so it's not just sitting there quietly, minding its own business. It is actively intercepting company resources.
It's stealing the sunlight.
But wait, if this lateral growing coworker is such a ruthless opportunist, how does it even get a foothold in the first place?
Right, it has to start somewhere.
Yeah, because it can't just bully its way into a perfectly healthy, incredibly dense office environment, right? There has to be some kind of initial vulnerability.
And that brings us perfectly to what the source calls the performance review of our rogue employee.
Okay, let's hear the review.
This is a look at Clover's specific likes and dislikes. The brief outlines the exact working conditions that allow this opportunist to just completely thrive, and it starts with the weather.
Like we mentioned, that cool spring weather.
Exactly. Clover loves cool, moist spring weather.
Yeah.
But the real critical vulnerabilities are actually found in the soil conditions.
Okay, what is it looking for down there?
Clover likes thin or patchy lawns, and it specifically prefers soils with really low nitrogen levels.
Okay, wait, I want to push back on the sequence of events there.
Sure.
Because the text says clover is an indicator species, right?
Yeah.
That its presence signals your turf is already thinning and lacks nitrogen.
Right, it's a signal.
But it also explicitly says clover likes thin lawns because there is less competition. So, which is actually happening here?
That's a great distinction to make.
Is the clover actually creating the bald spots by crowding out the grass? Or is it just kind of moving into the cheap, abandoned real estate where the grass has already died off from bad soil?
Based on the lawn pride framework, it exploits the latter to achieve the former.
Okay.
Clover is an opportunist first and an aggressor second. What's fascinating here is that the text states clover thrives precisely where your lawn is weakest. The whole sequence begins with a major deficiency in the environment.
So the lawn is already failing.
Yes, your soil lacks proper nutrients, specifically nitrogen, which means your grass just cannot sustain a thick, robust root system. The turf naturally thins out because it is literally starving.
So the grass is essentially retreating, leaving an empty cubicle just sitting there.
That's exactly it. The turf leaves a physical opening, the soil is exposed to the air and light, and clover seeds, which are highly resilient and honestly often already present in the soil, just waiting for the right conditions.
They just wait around?
Oh yeah, they can sit dormant for a long time. They detect that lack of competition. And then that cool, moist spring weather we talked about triggers their germination.
It's like the perfect storm.
It really is. Because there is no dense grass canopy above to block the sun, and no thick grass root system below to fight them for physical space in the dirt, the clover just sprouts effortlessly.
But once it's in that empty cubicle, it doesn't just stay there, right?
No, of course not. Once it gets established in that initial weak spot, its fast-spreading nature just kicks into overdrive.
It starts leaving the coffee mugs around.
Exactly. It establishes absolute dominance in that bald patch, and from that stronghold, it begins actively creeping laterally.
Pushing outward.
Right, crowding out the surrounding grass that is, frankly, already weakened by the low nitrogen soil. It exploits the initial weakness just to get a foothold, and then it weaponizes its crazy growth rate to take over the rest of the space.
Wow. So if you are listening and you are looking out your window right now and you're seeing those distinct dark green patches of clover scattered across otherwise paler grass, you are not just looking at a random assortment of weeds.
Not at all.
You are looking at a literal, localized map of your yard's failing health.
A diagnostic map.
The clover is highlighting exactly where your grass was too weak to hold its ground.
And the dislikes listed in the brief reinforce this mechanism perfectly too.
What does it hate?
Clover dislikes dense, well-fed turf grass. It strongly dislikes proper fertilization programs. And most importantly, it despises thick root systems.
Because there's no room for it.
Exactly. If the grass beneath the surface has this dense, tightly interwoven root network, There is literally no physical volume left in the soil for a clover seed to anchor itself. A strong structural environment just naturally rejects the opportunist.
Okay, so we have firmly established that clover is a squatter that exploits weak infrastructure.
100%.
But the mention of low nitrogen brings up a massive piece of conventional wisdom that I really want to dissect here.
Oh, I think I know where you're going with this.
Because anyone who has ever looked up how to deal with this plant has definitely stumbled across this widely repeated piece of lawn lore. You see it on every gardening forum.
Don't pull a clover.
Yes, don't pull the clover. It's actually good for the soil. It adds nitrogen.
Right, the classic defense.
This source addresses this directly, but it just completely flips the narrative.
It does, and the text handles this very carefully because that internet lore is actually based on a partial biological truth.
A partial truth.
Yeah. The brief acknowledges that, yes, clover does have the biological capability to create its own nitrogen.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting. The brief throws a massive wrench into the idea that this makes clover some kind of team player for your yard.
It is not a team player.
No. It says it creates nitrogen, sure, but the catch is that this nitrogen primarily benefits the clover itself.
Exclusively, almost.
To bring it back to our corporate metaphor for a second.
Let's do it.
Clover is not the generous coworker bringing in a big box of donuts for the whole office to share.
Not at all.
Clover is the employee who uses the company credit card to buy a top-of-the-line imported luxury espresso machine, puts it squarely on their own desk, and then absolutely refuses to give anyone else the passcode to turn it on.
That is the perfect way to visualize it.
Yeah.
It is a completely self-serving biological loop.
It's so greedy.
It really is. And the context is crucial here. The clover has entered an environment where the soil is already totally depleted of nitrogen.
Right, that's how it got in.
And the grass relies entirely on the soil to feed itself, so the grass is actively starving. The clover, however, does not rely on the soil's depleted reserves. It just generates its own private supply.
Which is just unfair.
It creates a massive, totally asymmetrical competitive advantage.
So the grass is burning its limited energy, trying to extract non-existent nutrients from the dirt, while the clover is basically operating with an infinite food cheat code.
Exactly. While the text notes that your grass, continues to struggle unless properly fed, the clover uses its self-generated nitrogen to fuel that aggressive lateral spreading we discussed earlier.
To build an even bigger desk.
Right. It does not act as a fertilizer pump for the surrounding turf. It uses the nitrogen to grow its own canopy wider, faster, shading out even more of the struggling grass, which weakens the grass further, creating even less competition for the clover.
It's a vicious cycle.
Left untreated, this hoarding mechanism is exactly what allows clover to systematically dismantle a lawn's uniformity.
So those dark green patches of clover look healthy, not because they are healing your lawn, but because they are hoarding all the resources while the rest of the system just starves around them.
They look healthy at the expense of everything else.
Man. But resource hoarding isn't the only issue. The brief flags, there's a very pragmatic physical hazard mentioned here that steps away from soil biology entirely and moves into everyday life.
Yeah, this is where it gets very real for homeowners. The text brings up a major point about pollinators. Clover produces flowers that attract bees.
And normally we hear constantly that pollinators are critical, right? That we need to save the bees.
Absolutely. On a macro level, that is vital.
Right. So it feels almost taboo to complain about a plant that feeds them. But the source is incredibly grounded about the reality of residential spaces.
It takes a very practical stance.
It does. It notes that if you have a yard you actually intend to use, like you have kids running around barefoot, or pets rolling in the grass, inviting hundreds of stinging insects into your recreational space is a really tangible safety hazard.
It highlights this direct conflict between broad ecological ideals and practical residential utility.
Yeah.
A lawn, at least in the context of this turf management brief, is a functional space. Its whole purpose is to provide a dense, uniform, safe area for a family to inhabit.
To actually be used.
Right. And clover actively works against every single one of those intended functions. It ruins the uniformity, it outcompetes the grass through resource hoarding, and it introduces a stinging hazard right into a high-traffic area.
It really is a fundamentally toxic employee.
The worst.
It steals company resources, it destroys the operational structure, and it brings dangerous guests into the lobby.
Security violation right there.
Seriously. So, since we have thoroughly diagnosed the damage this plant is doing, the next logical step is figuring out how management should intervene.
Time for the performance improvement plan.
Exactly. How do we evict it? And this brings us to the lawn pride eviction strategy, which honestly feels like a major philosophical departure from how most people handle weeds.
It really is a paradigm shift because the standard homeowner instinct, and frankly, even the instinct of a lot of commercial landscaping approaches, is highly reactive.
You see a weed, you kill a weed.
Exactly. You see a weed, you spray some chemical to kill the weed, and you walk away thinking the job is done. The problem is treated as just a surface-level aesthetic issue.
But this text argues for a much more systemic, proactive intervention.
It demands it, really.
So what does this all mean? The brief specifically states, and I'm quoting here, at Lawn Pride, we don't just remove clover, we address why it showed up in the first place.
That's the key right there.
Because if you just spray a chemical and kill the clover, what are you actually left with at the end of the day?
You are left with exactly what invited the clover in the first place.
No.
A bald patch of dirt in a lawn that is severely deficient in nitrogen.
It's still an empty cubicle.
Exactly. If you do not change the underlying environmental conditions, that empty space will simply be repopulated.
By something else.
Yep. Another clover seed will germinate, or a totally different opportunistic weed will take its place. The reactive approach basically guarantees a perpetual cycle of chemical application because the core vulnerability is never repaired.
So you aren't actually fixing the toxic workplace culture. You're just firing one bad employee while leaving the broken policies in place that will inevitably hire another bad one.
That is exactly what happens. To actually fix the culture, the text outlines a four-step focus.
What are the steps?
They emphasize strengthening the turf with proper nutrients, improving overall soil conditions, targeting weeds at the right time before they spread, and ultimately building a thicker lawn. If we connect this to the bigger picture, they are treating the lawn like an immune system.
I really want to linger on that immune system concept because I think that's brilliant.
It changes everything.
It does. The ultimate goal outlined here isn't just a yard that happens to be free of clover today. It's a yard that physically resists invasion tomorrow. The text pushes this idea that the best defense is a proactive offense. If you fix the soil chemistry, if you provide the proper nutrients and the nitrogen, the grass roots thicken up.
They get robust.
Right. They interweave beneath the surface, acting almost like white blood cells, forming this physical, impenetrable barrier.
And above ground, it's just as impressive. A well-fed turf creates a dense, thick canopy. When the grass is truly healthy, the blades stand tall and they are packed tightly together.
No empty cubicles.
Zero.
Mm.
Even if a clover seed manages to land in the soil somehow, that dense grass canopy acts as a shield, intercepting all the sunlight.
So the seed just sits in the dark.
Exactly. Without light, the weed seed cannot germinate. It just dies.
Yeah.
By treating the root cause, which is the soil health, you render the weed entirely irrelevant.
Wow.
Clover is merely a symptom. The weakened turf is the actual disease.
It really takes the blame off the weed in a way.
It does.
It's like the clover is just doing what nature programmed it to do, which is exploit an opening. The real failure is in our maintenance of the environment.
It's a failure of management.
Right. I think that is why the source's final takeaway is so compelling. They say, if you're seeing clover pop up this spring, it's your lawn's way of telling you it needs a little extra attention.
It completely transforms the weed from an enemy into a diagnostic tool.
Yeah.
It acts as an organic alert system. You know, the lawn obviously lacks a voice to request nitrogen or to complain about soil compaction.
It can't send an email.
Right. So it communicates its systemic failures by the type of opportunistic biology it is physically forced to support.
Man, we have covered incredible ground here today.
It's a lot to dig into.
Pun intended. We started by looking at this plant as, just a soft, harmless little sign of spring, a cute green face in the damp earth. And through the lens of this Lawn Pride brief, we have completely deconstructed it.
We uncovered a highly sophisticated opportunist, a plant that capitalizes on structural weakness, hoards vital nutrients to fuel its own lateral expansion, and ultimately signals that the very foundation of your lawn is failing.
It is the ultimate rogue employee, exploiting the system from the inside out. And honestly, understanding those mechanics changes everything about how you look at a simple patch of grass.
You'll never unsee it.
No, I definitely won't. Which leaves me with a thought I really want you, the listener, to chew on this week. We just spent this entire deep dive discovering that a common everyday weed, something we step on without a second thought, is actually a glaring warning sign completely disguised as a minor visual annoyance. It is a biological distress signal pointing to a much deeper, invisible failure in the soil. So, my question for you is this. What other minor annoyances in your life are you currently treating with a reactive surface-level fix?
That's a great question.
Whether that is a recurring headache, a persistent miscommunication in your own actual workplace,
Yeah.
or just a frustrating habit in your daily routine, are you just spraying the weed and walking away?
Just treating the symptom.
Exactly. Or are those annoyances actually glaring warning signs of a deeper systemic deficiency that you are completely ignoring? Next time you step outside and see that familiar green face in the yard, don't just see a weed, see the system. Keep a critical eye out there.
Thank you for listening to the Pain in the Grass podcast, sponsored by Lawn Pride of North Charlotte, Huntersville, your go-to name in turf care for homeowners and businesses seeking beauty, quality, and reliability, powered by family and fueled by passion. Until next time, make sure to take care of that pain in the grass.